Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live stream by the Upper Peninsula Environmental Coalition. Tonight's program is Let's Talk, Creating Virtual Communities in the UP. I am your co-host, Evan Zimmerman, Vice President of UPEC, here with UPEC President Horst Schmidt. And we are happy to present Northwoods Forest Conservation, Practical Advice for Landowners with Joe Hovel, Partners in Forestry, Northwoods Alliance.
Well, good evening, Joe.
Hi, Horst.
Really happy to have you here tonight.
And more than welcome.
Yeah, it's we're going to be talking to Joe, and he's going to give us a little bit of background about how he got into all of this, and then his new book that he edited, and whatever else we have time for, and Joe's interested in talking about. So, Joe, why don't you tell us what Northwoods Alliance and Partners in Forestry are?
Partners in Forestry is a landowner-based cooperative that we started about 20 years ago to focus on sustainability of forest resources. What we saw initially for a need was the fact that there was so many people interested in the woodlands, and it becomes somewhat of a divisive issue in that, do we cut trees, do we not cut trees? So we thought by forming this cooperative and exposing what we call good conservation practices on the land, linked to the land and so forth, that we could bring people closer together. And to a great degree, I think we've accomplished that. In 2006, at the time when several of us were very involved in opposing the Upper Peninsula Power Company's proposed land sales at Bond and Victoria Flowages and so forth, we were offered reins, if you will, to the Northwoods Alliance, which was a long, well-established land conservation organization, and it had been, for lack of a better term, I suppose, put on mothballs for a few years because, frankly, the people that were active with it, if anything, were burned out. So since January of 2006, we sort of have had the Northwoods Alliance and Partners in Forestry with some common board members and with a very related theme. And the great thing about having access to both organizations is that there's issues that one type of structure cannot get into by law, like legally a nonprofit cannot deal with a landowner's fiscal issues where a cooperative can. So we've had the ability with Partners in Forestry to represent some landowners as their agent for conservation land sales, for example. We've been able to do some lobbying and get some legislation passed. The big thing in 2007 was in Wisconsin, we call it the local lumber use law. And then, of course, the nonprofit side of it with Northwoods Alliance has numerous values also, especially the fact that we can accept donations for projects and they're tax deductible. So the merger of the two has been, I think, a really good thing. It's been such that we've looked at sustainable forestry and conservation as one and the same in practice, and we've connected it with a great deal of success, I think, to connect families to the land. We've offered assistance and guidance to landowners to help manage their land, and we base our philosophies on what I've often called the four values of land ethics. And before I get into that, I'll mention sort of a funny story. In 2014, I gave Congressman Benishek in the UP a tour of the Pilgrim River project, and we were just, the coalition of partners was just in the process of making an application for the Forest Legacy Program, which a few years later was very successful. And we wanted the congressman's support. So following a meeting at the Nara Center just south of Houghton, we went over and took a tour of the land, and Congressman Benishek wrote.
Oh, you're muted. Joe, you're muted.
Joe, I sent you an unmute request.
I don't know how that happened. Am I heard now?
Yes, yeah,
Loud
we
and
can hear
clear.
you again.
I don't know how that happened. I did not have my
Yeah.
hand on the mouse or on the keyboard. Something weird happened. But
Well, thank
anyway,
you, Mary.
I'll back up to where I was. In 2014, I gave Congressman Benishek a tour of the Pilgrim River project along with other partners following a meeting at the Nara Center. And he rode with me in the truck from the Nara Center over to the Pilgrim property. And he looked at me and he said, "I'm confused." He said, "Are you into forestry or are you into conservation?" And I looked at him, and for some reason, the answer came off the end of my tongue. I said, "Sustainable forestry without conservation is not long sustainable." I said, and I've got dozens of examples to prove that. And then he said, "What's important to you? Why is this important?" He said, "It is about more than growing trees." So we had a pretty vibrant discussion at that time. We talked about the economics, which are certainly apparent to everybody. There's obviously a fiscal component to land ownership, whether you're a family landowner or whether you're a large corporate owner or an industrial owner. There's a fiscal component to it, and it should not be about extracting the value from the land, but there is expenses to pay, and we all know that. And that's what supports school systems and a lot of other things through property tax. So the environment is very important, especially to all of us, I think, on here. And we don't need to get into too many details with the environment because it's very important, very apparent how important it is to protect the land, and you're protecting the environment and you're protecting human health at the same time. Then, of course, there's a social component to land ownership and land conservation, whether you're a family landowner or whether you're a TIMO that's enrolled this land in the commercial forest program or something like that to allow public access. That's what we're talking about. It's a social component. If you're a family landowner, maybe the social component is only your own family. But if you're a larger landowner and it's open to the public, the social component becomes extremely important. And then the next value, and maybe the final out of the big four, are the intrinsic values. And it's maybe the one that's hardest to grasp, but it's probably the one that's the most overwhelming. And when I mentioned that to Congressman Benishek at that time, he asked me, he says, "Well, what do you mean by intrinsic value?" And we were standing right next to the stand of Canada U on the Pilgrim project. And I asked him, I said, "You're a medical doctor." I said, "What do you know about the research that's being done with Canada U to extract the cancer therapy that in the past has always been extracted from Pacific yew, and the preliminary research shows that Pacific yew needs to be killed to extract the valuable medicinal ingredients, but Canada yew does not, that it can be kept growing in a sustainable fashion." And he knew nothing about it. So that was my opportunity. I said, "Congressman, there's the intrinsic value." I said, "There's all the things that we don't know anything about."
So, Joe, most people probably don't know that you're not in Michigan. You're actually in northern Wisconsin. And I thought maybe you'd give us a little background on, where you grew up and what got you into what you're doing today.
I grew up in southern Wisconsin in a rural farm community. And right after we were married young in 1970, we pulled up stakes and went to the country. So we lived in central Wisconsin, 40 miles south of Stevens Point and of uh, west of Interstate I-39. I guess you call it I-39 now. At that time, it was Highway 51. But we were in a really sort of a special area, in that there was a series of bluffs, Springfield Bluffs, but just north and just west of us were what has been transformed to huge irrigated agriculture, in industrial farmlands, if you want to call it that. And what became very uncomfortable for us at that time was all the chemicals that were used, the groundwater pollution and so on. And those things became very offensive. And by the very early 1980s, we were looking for a way out, basically. And I had started as early as 1972 and 3 a value-added wood products business, which was circled around using forest products and adding value to it. We had sort of a special niche market, in that I built log homes and cabins. Back in the early days, most of these cabins were for people that were, let's say, in that back to the country mode in the 1970s. And within a few years, of course, it grew to more full-time houses and so on. But by the late 70s, I was called to basically be involved let's say the lesson around groundwater pollution. So I think it was the late 70s and early 80s when I became environmentally active. And through the wood products business, I became, because I had good mentors in forestry, I became to understand the importance of sustainability, and I tried to practice that in many different ways. One of the things that was almost sort of a niche thing for us is I'd have a crew peeling logs, and when they'd get to the paint spot on the log, because that's the bottom of the tree that was marked for harvest, because that was the right one to harvest in a sustainable fashion, I would have them leave a couple square inches of the bark that showed the paint mark, because that was sort of our that was sort of our certification label, long before certification was cool. You know, these days certification is a big thing, and it's real cool. And there's the American Tree Farm System, the Sustainable Forest Initiative, and the Forest Stewardship Council. And back in those days, I just called it grassroots sustainability in a sense. But anyway, fortunately, I was able to, I think, connect to the importance of the sustainability and of the conservation values. And then in the early 80s, by the mid 80s, we were moving to far northern Wisconsin, and where we've been ever since. And just below the Sylvania Wilderness in northern Vilas County. And there's hasn't been a day that's gone by that I haven't been thankful to be able to spend all that time here. And of course, in that time, our oldest daughter went to Michigan Tech, and her second daughter went to Northern Michigan. So we had deep connections to the Upper Peninsula. And I think some of our early touring in the Upper Peninsula, if you will, was finding all the waterfalls we could find and hiking to them and so on. So we had deep connections to the Upper Peninsula. In 1990, I had the opportunity to try to help protect an 1,130 acre parcel of land that's just south of the state line and 15 miles west of Land O'Lakes. And I grasped at that. I had to borrow money to invest in that land. And when I look back at it, it was the smartest and best investment I ever made in my life. And that started a string of conservation activity that that I've been well committed to ever since. In 1990, we bought that 1,130 acre parcel of land, and it took some doing, but we were able to accomplish it at a really fair rate. And the return on it was so excellent just from sustainably managing the timber that we knew we had to do something good with it. In 2019, we had the opportunity to sell that land to the state of Wisconsin because the Northern Highland State Forest was being expanded in 2009. Excuse me. We sold that property to the state forest, and we looked for another property to fill the void so we could do what's called a like-kind exchange through the IRS process, where you're literally reinvesting earlier investment in another piece of the land without paying capital gains. You're not avoiding the tax, you're deferring it in a sense, but that's a common way for developers to operate. But we took it a step farther into conservation, and that's when we got involved with the Pilgrim River Watershed Project. So our connections to the UP have been long and steady and hard. We're well invested in the UP, and we're really, we really truly feel blessed to be able to be an advocate for land conservation on both sides of the border.
Well, Joe, the reason I invited you tonight is because I got this book called Northwood Forest Conservation. I don't know, can people see this? And it had all these great articles by people who, that's much better, who live up here and in Wisconsin. And then there's the second part about the projects that you've undertaken and successfully completed. And then the last part, I think, was, or the third part was conservation guidance, programs, and tips. So it's kind of like what I would call a scout manual without the scouts. And it's a great book, and I was really impressed when I saw it, and I said, well, I got to call Joe up and find out if he's willing to come on and talk about it. And before we forget, we have the link on our webpage where you can get the book from Joe, and Joe can explain a little bit about how you can get it, and then if you can maybe just talk about a few of the articles that about the people, one or two of them, and so they get an idea, and then we'll talk about the projects afterwards.
Sure. Exposing a lot of these things was not new to us. We've done this through our newsletters and our workshops and everything, that all our conservation forestry related activity for a number of years already. But we'd long thought that it was time to compile and highlight and celebrate some of these things. So with this pandemic, and the opportunity arose to ask the University of Wisconsin Center for Cooperatives, who has helped us with a lot of really great educational things through the years, if they thought this book was a good fit, and they jumped at it as well. So that led me to spend a very good amount of time through this past summer focusing on this. The first thing I did was to reach out to all the people that have contributed in that book with a story. And there's an excellent blend and balance in that in those contributions of people from the Upper Peninsula. A couple of them are board members of UPEC, as you can see, and people that I've worked with in Wisconsin, and they're all personal acquaintances. They're all personal friends. They're all people that I have a great amount of respect for, and who I have a great deal of trust and faith in as well. So inviting them to be part of something like this, I thought was really a timely and an important thing to do. And I think out of the dozen or so contributions to that book in section 1, there's just it's just a heartwarming balance of what is conservation, and it's there's no one of those stories, no single story that stands out to me, but it's the balance of all of those that I think was really important. In section 2, we highlighted some of the projects that have been a great success, and of course we focused pretty heavy on Wildcat Falls because it was just about the time that this book was ready to go to the printer, ready to go for the final layout for the printer, that we closed on the Wildcat Falls Community Forest. And that had been a really strong focus of our work for a couple of years. And then we went on and talked about some other projects, including the Pilgrim River Watershed Project and the Upper Wisconsin River Legacy Forest, which is just below the state line, and it's literally at the headwaters of the Wisconsin River. And about a couple other projects in the Upper Peninsula that have a great level of importance, and about the conservation work that we've done with helping landowners see their land under the control of the state of Wisconsin forest, or the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands in the state of Wisconsin in the Border Lakes area, out in that area, like I alluded to earlier, 15 miles west of Land O'Lakes. And then I think one of the really important components in the book is in the second half of section 2, we tried to expose and thank and celebrate, if you will, the really valuable conservation efforts from people that we either helped or that we were in some way, shape, or form connected to in helping with their conservation efforts. And they really are celebratory efforts. They're people that have put conservation easements on land trusts and things like that. And so in that section, each one of those people in my heart is a conservation hero, if you will, because to some degree they were able to grasp and see the importance of protecting their land in perpetuity. Then when we went into section 3 in the handbook, we tried to have a pretty broad discussion about the importance of protecting land and the practicality of it, because we can talk all we want about how important it is to protect that land for the environment, for the intrinsic reasons, the social reasons, and the economic reasons. But if we don't have some practical advice or some practical help, this could all be moot. So in that chapter, in that section, we exposed the Forest Legacy Program. We celebrated the importance of it. We celebrated the importance of the Community Forest Program based on the Wildcat Falls Community Forest and our past efforts with the Pilgrim River Community Forest and so forth. And then we got into more specifics with helping people understand what is a conservation easement. If I own land and I want to talk to the land trust about a conservation easement, what do I need to do? What sort of step do I have to take? What do I need to know? So those are the three, let's say, main sections in the book. But then, to be true to everything that we did in through this, we had to expose some really important factors. And one of the things, like any of us that are getting old and gray, realize that it's going to have to be the next generation that carries this work on. So I thought it was really special and important in that book to have your UPEC board member and our Northwoods Alliance board member, Maggie, expose the importance of engaging youth, which you see on page 46 and 47 of the handbook. And along with contributions from people that have been in our network for a long time. Nancy Warren, it was also with UPEC, and Ron Eckstein, my colleague down here, who's a retired wildlife biologist and just continues to do excellent and important work for conservation. And then we went into what I'd call the minor sections, maybe, and we left some guidance, right out in the open. So we've got page 49, we have a glossary of what we call frequently used acronyms, abbreviations, or terms. And then we have a section on what we call conservation resources, which can give a landowner or anyone interested in conservation the contacts to not only to how to find their land trust, but how to find help with a wide variety of different conservation issues. And then I thought that was a real important part of this, because without these contacts, somebody can feel like, well, where do I go from here? Well, we're trying to make it as easy as we can for them. And then we finished the book with some what I call visitor guides, because we've got a map in there of the Pilgrim River Forest. It shows the whole layout on page 55 of the whole Pilgrim River watershed conservation project. That was a 10-year ordeal. Started earlier in that with Copper Country chapter of Trout Unlimited, who were just an incredibly valuable partner in this. And then we have a visitor's guide for the Upper Wisconsin River Legacy Forest, which the importance there is the spruce grouse, a threatened species, which has really wonderful, suitable habitat on the Upper Wisconsin River Legacy Forest, as does on the Pilgrim River project. Let's back up a second here. The coaster brook trout is equally as important. So, we're to celebrate the protection of these properties for special wildlife, that really adds, let's say, a level of importance to this that's really undeniable in a sense. And then we also have a map of the Wildcat Falls Community Forest and show the hiking trail and on the 140 that where the trail is already established.
Joe, you're enjoying those pictures. Unfortunately, the people who are listening can't. Do you want to briefly tell us how they can get one of these handbooks?
All you have to do to receive one of these handbooks, there is no set charge whatsoever for the handbook. We're happy to send it out to anybody that wants one. We certainly do appreciate donations, because without that, it's pretty hard to pay the expenses. But all you have to do is send me an email, call me, or go to either northwoodsalliance.org or partnersinforestry.com. And all the information is there. I almost daily I get an inquiry about a book, and we're just happy to send them out, because I'm convinced it's a great resource, and we're really proud to put it together, and we're happy to share it. we're proud and excited to share it. So.
Well, the good thing is we have the information on our website, upenvironment.org. So feel free to look it up after the show. So, Joe, I think one of the things we want to really highlight is, if we have time to do both of them, but I think the Wildcat Falls that you've been talking about a little bit, I think it's really important for people to know how you got onto this thing, and the all the time and effort it took to raise the funding. And of course, we want you to talk about a little bit about why you picked it, because what's different about the Wildcat Falls than the next plot over.
The Wildcat Falls project was a special opportunity in a sense. As early as 2008, we learned of 2009, I think to be accurate. We learned that the Forest Service was going to possibly trade that land away. And many of us looked at that as being just too special to be outside of the public realm. It truly is a special place. The intrinsic values there are literally overwhelming, with the waterfall, the rock outcrops, the trout stream, the old growth hemlock and cedar, and the large diameter hardwoods. It truly is a special place and needed to be kept in public hands. So what we did as early as 2010 was to oppose the trade. As soon as the public process started with the Forest Service, we stepped up and we spent many hours writing documents. We wrote as many things as we could at administrative level. In 2011, we appealed the decision, and in the spring of 2011, we won the first appeal. We exposed the fact that they were dismissing the old growth features on that project as not important enough, which was very factual, and the appeal deciding officer agreed with us, and we won that appeal. But the next year they wrote a brand new environmental assessment, and they talked about the loss of the old growth features. So we learned a hard lesson in that the NEPA process, the National Environmental Policy Act, is a lot more about exposing what you're doing than it is about preventing what you want to do. They of course had some strong justifications for making the trade. They gained increased acreage, even though it was not quality acreage, and more importantly to them, they liquidated land that was maybe harder for, let's say, the continuity of their borders, because the Wildcat Falls property at 160 acres has an awful lot of border with private landowners, and if it had been blocked with a greater size national forest piece, it would have never even have been considered for trade. So in 2014, we lost the first federal court decision, and the federal court after it, and this was in the court for over 2. So the point I'm making here is we successfully slowed this thing way down. But in September of 2014, and I'll never forget that day, because I had just arrived home from the celebration of the success with the Pilgrim River Community Forest. And of course, life always has its balances. And after being on such a a high for such a wonderful conservation accomplishment. I come home to the news that the federal court denied our lawsuit and confirmed that the trade was okay. So what we did was we made an appeal right away through the same attorney that filed the original lawsuit in 2012, which we lost in 2014, filed an appeal, and that stalled the trade for another year and a half or thereabouts. And then the hard lesson that I learned, and I don't like to focus on this, but it is worth mentioning, is how, let's say, how gray these federal court decisions can be, because the federal appeals court, in denying our appeal, said that our concerns were satisfied in 2010 when the Forest Service dropped acreage. And that had absolutely nothing to do with our concerns, because the Forest Service dropped acreage in 2010, so the values would be close enough to justify a trade, because the land that the Forest Service was going to acquire was cut over land, and it had half the value or less that the Wildcat Falls property did. So that's what the court based their decision on, and it was erroneous. And even though I don't like to dwell on that, I think it was worth mentioning. It was a hard lesson in a sense. But what we did is shortly after that, and as early as early 2017, after the trade recipient disposed of the land that the Forest Service wanted and acquired the Wildcat Falls property, we started having a conversation with him, and his motivations had changed quite a bit through the years. I think he was no longer interested in developing the 40 acres that was near County Line Lake like he had originally talked about and so forth. So we were able to pull together a small group of conservation-minded investors, and we were able to purchase that land from him the very first week of 2018. And immediately we started focusing on the community forest as a possible solution to this. So based on our experience with the Pilgrim River Community Forest, we thought it was a good fit, and we thought we had a great project. And with a huge, very grateful thank you to UPEC, it was very early in 2018 when UPEC gave Northwoods Alliance the first notable grant that was to prove to be a big part of providing the matching funds that the community forest project needed. The community forest program requires a 50% non-federal match. So you can do it through private foundations, through private donors, and you can even do it with government money if it's at the state or local level, but none of that was available for this project. So with UPEC's help and giving us the impetus, and by early 2018, we had a start, and we felt we had a focus. And it was just a year later, in the spring of 2019, when we received word that the Wildcat Falls Community Forest Project ranked number 4 in the country out of 15 projects that they funded, and there was 15 projects that they weren't even able to consider. So that basically confirmed what we had long known, that the Wildcat Falls Community Forest was a very important project, and of course that helped a lot to gain the final momentum in fundraising with different grants. And in the story in the handbook, of course, we thank everyone who was a big part of the Wildcat Falls success. So now there's a community forest in Wildcat Falls, 8 miles from Waters Meet, that anybody and everybody can go enjoy and for forever is the hope. So.
Oh, is the public invited to go to the falls?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It'll probably be spring before we have a more formal sign there, but at the website under Wildcat Falls and in the handbook, there is a map and it directs people there. And there is enough marking and there is a marked trail. So somebody there is about a short mile of trail marked, but you can see an awful lot of things in a mile. I mean, you can walk through some just old growth splendor. You can see the waterfall. You can see fantastic rock outcroppings, and you can see the gorge that Scott and Hall Creek goes through. And it's frankly it's also beautiful in the winter, even though it's very possible in the winter that the waterfall itself becomes iced over from the mist that the falling water forms and causes a lot of times a block of ice around it. But it is a special place and people are more than welcome. There's 120 acres that's contiguous that the waterfall falls on the center 40 of that 120 acres. And then there's a 40-acre parcel that's separated by about a half a mile, but it's also very important because it's very close to County Line Lake, and it has some very well-stocked stands of hardwood, exposing a lot of really nice old growth features. And in the springtime, it's just an incredible bed of wildflowers on that parcel. So it definitely is something that people are invited to see, and we hope people will continue to enjoy it forever.
The Wildcat Falls would be considered in the middle of nowhere, so to speak. But on the other hand, the Pilgrim River project was something that was right next to the south side of Houghton. And, the project was something where you were involved, but you were part of a larger community project. Is that right?
Yes, it is. And the Pilgrim River watershed project was really special because, if anything, that created what I would term an enviable partnership of conservation interests to achieve a common goal. And it not only was successful because of those strong partnerships, but such wonderful bonds were established because of it, that it truly was an incredible conservation effort and in an important project. My roles in that were pretty diverse. I was a huge and large investor in the project because we used the funding from our sale to the state of Wisconsin, Northern Highland State Forest, to acquire a large chunk of the property from the Mulpus group, the TIMO that had just bought it from the Forest Land Group, with conservation in mind. And then immediately, Partners in Forestry and Northwoods Alliance forged a coalition with the conservation interests right there. The Copper Country chapter of Trout Unlimited, the Keweenaw Land Trust, the Keweenaw Audubon folks, and the Houghton Keweenaw Conservation District all played incredibly important and valuable roles in that long-term conservation. So what we have on the Pilgrim River project in its success have a 276-acre community forest, which is owned by the Keweenaw Land Trust. And that's at the northeast part of the project. And it's just an incredibly scenic parcel, very close to Michigan Tech trails, very close to Michigan Tech property, and very close to the city of Houghton. And then on the other side of the river to the south and going west in a couple different blocks is what we call the Pilgrim River Legacy Forest. That was the community forest was established in 2014 through the community forest program, and the forest legacy portion of it was finalized in 2017 with the forest legacy program. And through all of this, the effort and the common bond that was created to accomplish this conservation goal was just literally heartwarming. And to bring it even a step further, there's the acreage that was the legacy forest part that we're involved with is over 1,100 acres. The community forest that the land trust owns is 276 acres, and then a neighboring landowner there who owned the land in between the two legacy forest portions. We call one the heritage block, and the other one is the headwaters block because it's farther upstream. He donated a conservation easement to the land trust, which was able to be used as part of the match for the community forest program. So altogether, there's somewhere around 1,700 acres of land that's protected with public access and access to the Pilgrim River for fishing and all a wide variety of other activities. There's even a mountain bike trail on one portion of the legacy forest. So that truly was, Horst, a very thorough and heartwarming conservation effort.
It's really interesting that we would have 1,700 acres next to Houghton. And even though, when I want to leave town, it only takes about 2 minutes to get out into the wilderness here, any direction you want to go. But still, it's such a gem, to have this small watershed come together. And the other thing we didn't mention is that they have this boardwalk on the other side of Highway 41 where the river flows through, and that has been really beautiful to be able to walk out into the reeds and everything, and to see the birds in the spring and summer, and be able to just stay there and see what you want. And I suspect people can fish there too, and maybe good fishing because there's a lot of vegetation there, so there's got to be food.
It was the fishing interest, Horst, that first was the driving force behind the conservation on the Pilgrim Forest. It was the Copper Country chapter of Trout Unlimited that as early as 2006, I think it was, and I have a copy of the letter. They sent a letter to Michigan DNR asking them for help in protecting that portion of the Pilgrim River because it was such a sought after area for trout fishing. And as we show in the handbook through the fishery researchers at Michigan Tech, they've not only confirmed the presence of the coaster brook trout there, but they've also gone a step further in that the Michigan DNR has established special fishing regulations to protect the coaster brook trout on the Pilgrim. The Pilgrim was an incredible project, partly because of the acreage, in a sense, for real large conservation projects is somewhat modest, but the land has such a varying degree of topography, such a varying degree of features, and it spans several miles because it's the part close to town, doesn't get near as much snow, and the Canada U in that part is somewhat trampled and browsed by deer. But then when you get to the upstream portion, which is a few miles southwest, in your higher elevation, the snow levels apparently get that much deeper, and the Canada U doesn't even look like it's been touched there. So it truly is a special project, and something I was really grateful to be able to be a big part of.
Well, people don't realize it, but if you live in the area, the start of the river or the head of the river is somewhere around Painsdale, which is in the mountains as you're leaving Houghton from on Highway 26, and that's got to be at least 10, 12 miles out. So we're talking about a really substantial project when you think about it. And of course, you had other partners in there, Trout Unlimited and the Keweenaw Land Trust, I believe, both contributed to the project. Were there any other partners that stepped?
Well, the Trout Unlimited folks and the Land Trust were huge parts of it. But the Houghton Keweenaw Conservation District was a very, very important part of it as well, because they commissioned a Pilgrim River watershed management plan as early as 2011, I think, 2011 or 12, and got federal funding to do that. And through that management plan we were able to, let's say, disseminate a lot of the information about the river itself and the importance of protecting the river. The whole watershed for the Pilgrim River is only not even 15,000 acres. So the fact that we were able to protect over 10% of that whole watershed, which is in the area of these communities just south of Houghton, that's a pretty special thing. And I remember getting a call from, I think it was maybe the paper up in Houghton some years back, and they said, "What's the driving force behind this Pilgrim River project?" And I said, "It's the people. It's the people that not only want to see that part of the environment protected, they love the legacy trees on the property. They've got a connection there to hunting, to just going for a hike, whatever." But and then he said, "Well, is this a big deal?" And I said, "When you can protect that size of a project, that amount of acreage, that close to a city, and that close to a university, it's a big deal." And it certainly is.
It is. One other thing before we head out. What was I going to say? I know the role of land trusts are, we're not talking about a lot of land compared to, say, state forest or a private industrial forest. But it's like land trusts are like spark plugs, aren't they? In the sense that they, make people aware that there are special places and they need to be able to protect them, be able to have access to them. I think that's something that people aren't always aware of, and the fact that a lot of this is done by persons like yourself who really don't stand to gain anything financially from doing this. This is all kind of like free labor on your part to be able to do this and make it happen. I think, and that's the way it is with land trusts. Is there's a lot of volunteer help, even if they have some paid staff. It's still mostly people like yourself and people who have worked with the Trout Unlimited and Keweenaw Land Trust and the Conservation District that really have put it together. It's special. I think you're part of that special group of people that really make a difference in how we can save a place like this. Because if you guys hadn't come along, Pilgrim River wouldn't be picked up by the state DNR for anything. So that's the thing. It's you have an eye for something, and you want to be able to have access to it, and that's part of our legacy here in Houghton and Keweenaw County, because we have so many different properties that are preserved and have access to it. It's like having a big city park system in a small area. It's really amazing.
Land trusts are extremely important, and to dismiss them otherwise, because the land they protect is not a huge part of the overall acreage, would be ignorant, I think, because the land trusts to a great degree are not only helping to preserve some of the most important places, but when you add all these things up, the cumulative benefit of this is, becomes pretty big. It's no longer a small deal. I mean, we take a few thousand acres here and a few thousand acres there, and it becomes a big deal. And it's very important. And I don't know anybody in a land trust or anywhere in conservation work that's doing it for the money. I don't think. I mean, people are doing it because they love the land, and the fact that there is some people with some land trusts that are making a living from it doesn't mean that they're not doing it for the money. They're doing it because they love the land. And they want to see the land protected.
Okay. Well, Joe, I really appreciate your taking the time to come on tonight and talk about your work. And we wish you the best in the future. And hopefully you'll get at least a couple hundred more parcels and as you go along here and try to preserve other little gems that you find, because not everybody likes to go out in the woods and find these little things, and you actually have to have a lot of time out in the woods and to get to know the land, be able to do the kind of thing that you're doing as well. So we really do appreciate that you're doing this work, and all the other people who have been assisting over the years. So we're better off for it. So again, I want to really thank you, and hopefully you'll get a lot of people getting that book from you to see if we can do it. And again, if you go to the upenvironment.org, that's where you can find the links to contact Joe about the handbook that he's willing to offer to you. And if you're able to give a little bit to help him out, he would appreciate it. And but the main thing is he wants that book to get out there into the world and let people know what the beauty is. And this, what I really appreciated was the pictures, the quality and the volume of pictures that you have in there. That's really, really great. And you don't see that very often in publications that are doing this kind of handbook thing. So anyway, thanks again, Joe, and hopefully we'll have you on again sometime in the future after your next acquisition, and we'll go from there.
Thank you very much, Horst. I appreciate everybody that tuned in as well. Thank you.
All right. Well, good night. Evan, you want to show people what we're going to be doing at the end of this month?
Absolutely, Horst. So, at the end of this month, we will have an environmental review of 2020 in the last week of December.
We haven't decided on a day yet, probably a Tuesday or Wednesday of that week. I figured there's a lot of people who are on vacation and have time on their hands, and we're going to test that belief of mine and find out if we can do things. So we're going to probably talk about line 5, because that's one of our big stories. And so we're going to look around to see what other ones that are important for the UP, and then perhaps take a look downstate to see what we think may be important stories that have implications for us. So we thank you again for joining us, and we hope you have a Merry Christmas, and we'll see you before the new year.
Thank you.
Thank you.